Hello everyone, welcome to the Eternal Spoiler Breakdown. My name is Pojo. We are going to be talking today about Promises by Firelight, the new Eternal campaign, complete with actual campaign quests. So campaigns are returning. We're not just getting an expansion of cards. It looks like there are going to be some actual games that you will play associated with the cards that are coming out. And we're going to be seeing a bunch of new cards coming out, and 4 of them have been spoiled so far. So we're going to go over each of the cards that have been spoiled, and we're going to break them down one by one, starting with the announcement card, Ollie, Champion of Kadosh. So Ollie, Champion of Kadosh, is a 3-cost, double justice, 1/1 with strength and health equal to your highest cost relic that has flying when it has 8 strength or more. So you can give it flying by giving it like a finest hour or like an augmented form, or you can just play an 8-drop relic and make it an 8/8 forever, and then it will always be like in that exact level of strength. It is a pretty interesting card, but it also has the summon ability. You may silence an enemy unit with 4 strength or less. This card will of course be playable in both Expeditions and Throne, as will all of the Promises by Firelight cards. So this is going to be something that should be decently powerful in certain decks. It's relatively cheap to play. It's got like kind of a Hero the People type effect where it is doing some very, very nasty things the longer it's out, or like if you are sticking around and playing more relics on top of things, then the card gets bigger, and then the card gets evasion, and then it gets pretty nasty. So that's kind of interesting in its own right, but really you're probably playing this card for the summon effect, assuming you have some amount of small relic available or something along those lines. Like if you're playing an Oathbook deck or anything with like Porcelain Mask or Infinite Hourglass, well, probably not Infinite Hourglass, but anything where you have like an additional amount of extra strength that you can give it, you get plus strength and plus health equal to your highest cost relic. So you can get Ollie down as a 3/3 or a 4/4 on turn 3, and then that 4/4 also silences an enemy unit with 4 strength or less. So like you can be like, play a Porcelain Mask on 2, play a 4/4 Ollie on, or 3/3 Ollie on 3, and then Ollie gets something out of the way that has mastery on it. Maybe it silences a Verret, maybe it messes with Nash's ability to muster, or turns off a Soti Spellshaper. There's a lot of different options here where basically Ollie is giving access to early silencing in the same way that a Valkyrie Enforcer might in Expedition or in Throne. So yeah, this is something where in Expedition you actually have a cheap silence effect on a warrior, and that's something that actually could be really, really beneficial. And the card has great late game scaling, even though its initial silence ability requires you to actually jump through a couple of hoops. The main problem, of course, is that the card does require a relic, which there aren't that many good relics in Justice, particularly in Expedition. There's a few, but like for the most part, it's pretty hard to get something down that's actually going to allow Ollie to be super powerful on base. And yeah, there are some general weaknesses to that design, because like a 3-cost 1/1 is just not very playable, even if it has the summon ability attached to it. Like you wouldn't play the 2-cost 1/1 with silence for any reason, even if you like really need the silence. Like it's just not a good enough body, because like it dies to everything and everything under the sun. Ollie is something that can maybe stick around long enough to get buffed up, since removal is a little bit lighter in Expedition, but I would say that by and large in both Throne and Expedition, like this card is really, really restricted if you are not playing relics to buff up the cost, which means you really have to play Ollie with a relic to get the best benefit from it. In Throne, I think it's probably a little underpowered. Silencing an enemy with 4 strength or less is pretty useful, but there are going to be other units that you would like to silence that maybe do not have 4 strength or less. Looking at like Kairos and like a large variety of like scary 5-drops and 4-drops and 3-drops. This is something that definitely turns off some small stuff, but like maybe is not as handy as Valkyrie Enforcer in those particular respects, and requires you to go into some relic costs. But potentially, if you can get some good things going with Ollie with a lot of relics, then it might be playable in Throne. I think Expedition is going to be a little bit more where it belongs. So yeah, it's a little hard to evaluate this card's general strengths. Since it's dependent on what relics come out in Promises by Firelight, but I would say that it's a reasonable Throne play in a deck that has a good amount of relics, like something like a Martyr's Chains deck or something wild where you actually have access to a lot of good Combre relics. And then in Expedition, it's actually got a decent chance at being like totally playable in maybe even like a tier 2 or tier 1 deck. But yeah, this is more like a tier 3 card in Throne for the moment. I would say there's not too much that you can do with it in Throne that you can't do elsewhere with other things already. but still, it's pretty interesting for like just simple 3-cost warrior, and the strength of the card can be really, really crazy depending on like what level of relics you can get out. If you can like cheat out a relic, if there's some way to like make a relic cheaper for a turn or something like that, then you can get really, really interesting buffs off of it. Like, yeah, there's a lot of interesting options available, and that's pretty solid stuff. But yeah, like you can do some wild things with it, and the card does have a lot of potential strength, but it is tied up in the relics and also in the silence effect being good, both of which are pretty likely in Expedition, I would say. Like, certainly there's probably going to be some decent relics that you can play for Ollie, and then also like the strength of it is the actual ability to silence mastery cards is really relevant, and I would say something that Justice really sorely needs. So this might actually fill a slot, and that should be something that like should definitely be taken into account. That silence effect is more needed than the body itself, and as a result, I think you might see some Justice decks running interesting relics from here on out, perhaps curses or something along those lines. It pairs very well with Kadosh Sees All, of course, or anything with like a lot of like Waystone Fragment. There's a lot of interesting possibilities there. It pairs okay with Mistrust, but I would say that like anything where the relic is going to get popped is maybe not as strong because there's a lot less capacity to actually get that card going. But still, it's an interesting option and certainly something that we could see in the future. We have 2 champions spoiled so far. Extol, Champion of Grodov, is the second. This is a 6-cost 0/0 with strength and health equal to your maximum power, and when an enemy unit dies, play a random power card from your deck. So strength and health equal to your maximum power is tricky, particularly on a 0/0. This card, if it gets silenced, immediately dies, which was a problem on Timekeeper and is way more of a problem on a 6-drop that doesn't have any immediate board impact. I think this card's completely unplayable in Throne for certain. Like, there's just absolutely no way that this is something that you're going to be able to get off and then like actually get good benefits from. But if you can play it in Expedition, I don't know. I still don't think that it's terribly strong. At 6, it is a 6/6, and then every single time that you ramp up or get more power off of like Zoltar Arcanum style decks, this card will get significantly more powerful, in addition to growing each time that an enemy unit dies, because it plays more random power cards from your deck, and it does not play those cards depleted, which is a really big deal. If you can cheat out Extol in some way, the thing that's really interesting about Extol is that Extol can refresh your power. So like, managing to chain this into like some sort of interesting 1-drop combo with like an infinite effect. There's like some mild infinite combo potential here that I don't think is really possible in current forms, but chicanery could ensue, so there's some potential for Extol to become a combo card in the future. As it stands, I think this card's pretty weak in Throne, not amazing in Expedition, and certainly has some other like interesting just options attached to it. Nonetheless, it's a very big body. You're happy to get it in a draft, which you're not going to see it in a draft or anything like that, but it is something that you can definitely put out if you've got it in the campaign as a like popper option to just make sure that you have like a big old card on turn 6 when you're playing with a cheaper set. So that's something that you got some potential with, and certainly its position in a Zoltar Arcanum deck is to be fun, if not necessarily good. So I like that part of it, and potentially there's a lot more strength to this card than we are seeing. The next card is definitely some good strength, but actually let's cover Sunset Stone first, since this one's probably a good finisher. Sunset Stone, your elves have +1/+1 and endurance, which is very exciting. If you have been playing Expedition lately, you'll know that there's a lot of focus around like endurance elves or like endurance Elysian, I would say, like with a yellow and blue, and elves are typically in Feln with a little bit of splash of time. The notable elf in time is Borderlands Lookout, which is the 0-cost, or the 1-cost 0/1 with +1/+1 for each influence that your opponent has. So it's going to be a pretty crazy pile of stuff. Like, there's definitely some interesting stuff going on with that. And this basically just makes Borderlands Lookout a lot better, while also allowing you to play with a lot of more aggressive options. There are 2 very good 1-drop elves, both of which are 2/3s in most conditions, and even bigger than that in other conditions. So like, this is already the start for an interesting aggro deck where you basically have like a 3-cost Xenon Obelisk for elves that also happens to be an Infinite Hourglass for elves. So if you've got the right number of elves with the right number of stats, that's a lot of strength to be adding. In addition, the card has once per turn. You may pay 5 to draw 2 elves from the top 5 cards of your deck, then discard the rest. So, assumably, this means up to 2 elves and not just 2 elves. Like, I assume you can activate this ability even if you can't draw 2 elves, but that's just like a minor quibble, I would say, with the coding language of the card, because it definitely does. Assumably, you are going to be able to get as many elves as you like, which is to say 2 from the top 5 cards of your deck if that number of elves are on top of your deck. So yeah, it's an interesting concept overall. Like, I don't mind elves seeing a little bit of tribal love. Elves are generally a very tribal faction. They're one of the most tightly knit factions, I think, in terms of tribal. They have probably more tribal cards than anybody else. So like basically just playing elves tends to always lead to playing more elves, and then when you have a lot of elves, they all tend to work together in a bunch of different interesting ways. So this is definitely true of these elves as well, and this card basically provides everything you need for them. Like, the only weird thing about it is that it's off color, which I kind of like. It kind of forces you to go into a different form of elves, and I would expect to see another time elf in Promises by Firelight, since we are seeing some interesting buffs for elves of that type. So yeah, the secondary effect does curve into Zende, the Heartbinder. It is a relic for elves that care about relics, of which there is one that costs 6 and is in blue and purple. But there are like a decent amount of other things that you can do with it. And yeah, the card I think should see play in both. It'll definitely see play in Expedition. I would say it's a very likely hit for Throne, just because it's fairly cheap for an obelisk type effect, and giving elves endurance is a pretty big deal, since it basically just allows you to roll Rindra into a 6/6 endurance, and that's a wild time. So yeah, it's pretty interesting, and elf aggro is definitely going to be a thing in the future. This is something that really enables that at rare, which is neat. Generally very cool. All right, next up, and last but not least, for sure, we actually saved this one for last because it's a pretty good one, and it's a pretty good one for Skycrag in particular. 6 cost, 6/7, and this one's got big art. Cool. This is called Spitflame Draconis. It is a 6 cost, 6/7 for double fire, double primal. It's got flying. Pay 4 to deal 1 damage to an enemy unit. If the unit has endurance, kill it, which immediately kills the Sandstorm Titan. That's pretty exciting stuff. Summon, stun an enemy unit, and it stays stunned while you have Spitfire Draconis. So effectively the Ice Sprite ability on a large dragon. Now, right away, the Ice Sprite ability on a large unit is something that should be really reasonable. Like, there's a 7/7 out there that saw a little bit of play when it first came out for the ability to just lock down another unit and basically like get some board advantage while also creating a board lock on something that needed to be locked. But of course, the weakness of that card is that if there are a lot of endurance units on the board, then it can't do as much. It can only get like little things. Spitflame Draconis can lock down a little thing, kill a bunch of endurance units that it can't lock down, and then just continue to tick away. It's a 6-cost card that you absolutely have to answer, and has lovely stats on top of that. 6/7 is vulnerable to nothing but Ice Bolt, and trades well with most other 6-drops in the format, which is a pretty big deal. It also locks down the ones that it can't trade with, like for example the 8/8 with the spells ability, which something that you generally do not like to keep around on board anyways, but it's still pretty interesting overall. So this card provides a lot of value. I think that that's like a really important part of it. It's got the ability to win the game because it's a large evasive unit, so you have to kill it for that reason. If it does not win the game, or if it's somehow locked down, it's still killing all of your opponent's little things, and also killing all of your opponent's things with endurance, which is a very big deal as well. You can't give everything endurance, sadly. There's no way to infinite hourglass your opponent's board, but maybe we'll see that in the future. One thing that you could do for 7 is Accelerated Evolution. I believe that targets either side of the board, or at least it used to, unless they've changed it. But yeah, I'm pretty sure that it does. Double check that real quick. But yeah, like essentially there aren't that many ways to give something endurance to kill them, but you can still do some pretty wild stuff with it. And yeah, I could definitely see it being played in a deck with options like Accelerated Evolution. Gonna have to search for Accelerated Evolution Eternal, because that's a thing. But yeah, that is a unit, not an enemy unit. So you can actually do that to give something endurance to kill it with Spitflame Draconis, which in Ixtun control, that's an interesting option. Certainly something that you could play around with. Yeah, Spitflame Draconis is definitely a really preeminent big drop at 6, which I believe that this particular format is very lacking for. Like, Skycrag is super happy to have it in Expedition. In Expedition, this card is absolutely insane. It shuts down a wide variety of good things. It kills, like, basically anything with endurance off of, like, time, and there's a lot of endurance cards in time, as well as a pretty solid focus on that 2-drop 1/3. The main issue with the card is that it's a little bit slow. 6-drop is not always easy to get to, but I would say that if you can get to Carvet, you can get to Spitflame. The main issue is that Spitflame does not keep you alive very long, so if you're on your last turn when you're hitting Spitflame, then like this might not help you get out of that situation. There's some potential vulnerabilities to the card, but overall it seems like a really strong throne inclusion and a very strong expedition inclusion. Overall, I think it's a really interesting take on Skycrag. This is the kind of thing that I'd like to see out of Skycrag a little bit more often. I feel like Skycrag should have some dragon focus in general, because like it's something that doesn't get explored very often with it. We've tried going down the spells route with Skycrag, and Prodigious Sorcery has just been no fun whatsoever. So like, yeah, I'm pretty excited to see like some interesting large dragons coming out of the set, and also to see a lot more dragon tribal stuff going on. Keep in mind this is a card that you can fetch with Dragon Forge and play for 5, which is absolutely wild. Like, that's a really, really solid thing. And like, yeah, you can just like do some really crushing, ridiculous options with it. So it's a fun card. There's a lot of ways to decrease the cost of it, allow you to, like, you can Journey Guide it, you can Oni Dragonsmith it, you can Dragon Forge it, you can Sauropod Wrangler it. Like, there's a lot of ways to make this card very, very quick and efficient. And when it's quick and efficient, it's just a big mid-range beater that comes down quickly and just ends the game very, very fast. All right, that's it for today. So we did just get a we got our like Diamond Stream swag. You might notice that I am wearing an Eternal hoodie that they finally mailed to me as a result of being like a streamer for a while. I also got like a fancy tote bag, which I don't think I have on me at the moment, but yeah, it says Loca Pojo on the back, which maybe you can see that, maybe you can't, but either way, like I'm pretty pleased with it. So thanks to Direwolf for sending out cool merch to streamers and supporting streamers in general. That's like a neat little thing that just happened. So very, very glad to have that happen. The ECQ is today, or it's this weekend. So if you're playing in the Throne, not the ECQ, what is it called? The qualifier? I can't keep track. Yeah, ECQ Promises by Firelight is today, so if you want to qualify for the Eternal World Championship, there's a big ol' event on Friday and Saturday, 28 runs, and you can play that and get a little bit of extra. There's also an Expedition Melee going on right now to earn Expedition points, so keep those in mind if you're playing for tournament points. That's about it for announcements for today. We will be back with more Eternal stuff and certainly more spoiler breakdowns very soon. I got a fancy new deck tech that I'm really excited to show off, so that'll hopefully be up by as soon as tomorrow. And yeah, we'll see you next time. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. As always, I'm on Twitch, YouTube, Twitter, and Patreon, so feel free to like or subscribe or send me Amazon Prime things from like your Amazon Prime Twitch thing. Oh god. Yes, all of the fun things where like if you wish to support the stream, you can do it through any of those channels. And thank you so much for watching. Have a lovely evening. See you next time.